Hello everyone, and welcome to today's short how-to webinar, where in just 15 minutes we're going to look at the topic of how to drive intelligent migration. And we're going to focus for this particular demonstration on the migration of content from file shares to SharePoint. My name's John Challis, and I'm one of the founders of Concept Searching. Concept Searching's been around now for a little over 10 years, and here are some statistics on the company. We've got well over 100 customers now using our technology, and we've won a number of awards from people like KM World, which we've managed to achieve for a number of years in a row now. As I mentioned, what we're going to be looking at here today is the use of our Taxonomy Workflow component in tandem with our automated document classification to perform intelligent migration by assigning metadata to documents and then using that metadata to drive the moving of documents from one location to another. And we'll be looking at the various options as we go through such a process. There'll be a live demonstration at the end where we're actually going to look at an example of moving documents, as I mentioned, from file shares into designated SharePoint location. A quick word on our underlying technology. Compound term processing is our underlying technology, which we use for all of our products. And it's essentially the ability to identify meaningful multi-word concepts in unstructured text using purely statistical methods. And one example here is if you take the three-word concept triple heart bypass, that has clear meaning. You know exactly what I'm talking about when I put those three words together. But if we look at the words in isolation, all of them are actually pretty ambiguous. The word triple can mean several things. The word heart isn't necessarily talking about a human heart or even a person's heart. And bypass is also rather ambiguous on its own. But when you have a technology that can string the three words together and identify such a meaningful three-word concept in unstructured text, then you're able to begin to disambiguate the multiple meanings and really home in on specific concepts, avoiding false positives both in the search process and in the classification process. What we're going to be focused on here is specifically using classification in order to drive migration. And if we look at some of the issues involved in a migration approach, of course, there's a lot more to migration than simply taking every document on a file share and dumping it into a library in SharePoint. That would be a fairly dumb migration process. And in almost all cases, we want to do something much more intelligent than that, picking out usually a small percentage of documents that need to be moved, identifying different destination locations depending on the types of documents, and then potentially some other things, maybe identifying privacy issues, sensitive documents identification, potentially changing content types in SharePoint depending on the type of documents that we're moving, or indeed identification of records so that we can set things like records retention policies. So usually quite a range of things to look at. So in principle it might seem a simple objective, but the reality is there's often a lot of complexity involved in migration operations. And here we can see some statistics. 84% of data migration projects fail. You might argue with that number. It seems on the high side to me, but this is a quotation from Bluer Research. And the clear message, I think, in this slide is that migration is difficult. Migration often fails. And in particular, when we ask end users to perform migration on a manual basis, you're often heading for trouble because you're overwhelmed by the volumes. If you have a large number of documents, you're simply not going to be able to do it manually. getting humans to identify the meaning of documents, the type of document, and the location where documents should be moved, dealing with things like duplicate documents, different revisions of documents, and so on, from an unstructured location such as a file share, is extremely difficult for a human to determine, and as a result, if your volumes are high, you're going to need to perform some kind of automated approach if you're going to have any chance of success in the migration process. With intelligent migration, we might test the migration by moving documents from one file share to another, but often the requirement is to move into SharePoint, or maybe from one version of SharePoint to another, so perhaps from SharePoint 2007 to SharePoint 2013, for example. Often we're going to want to use the taxonomy structure located in the SharePoint term store, and of course that's something you can do with concept searching. And here's an overview of what a migration project often looks like. The first part is using auto-classification to identify content and tag content, and then we can perform a test migration strategy to see which documents are being identified, check that the right documents are being processed, pass that through a quality assurance process, and then potentially iterate the taxonomy development, make some adjustments to the classification process before finally doing the migration on the live content and actually moving the documents into SharePoint. Well, we often find that this is an iterative process. Your first attempt at creating the migration taxonomies may not be absolutely perfect. You may not be picking up all of the right documents and routing them to all of the right locations. And so there's often a need to perform a QA round and some level of adjustment to the process. But essentially what we're trying to do is to take inherently unstructured content from a file share, from other SharePoint content, or from legacy content management systems like Hummingbird or Documentum, for example. And then in all or any of those source locations, to identify the type of document, identify sensitive information, identify records and types of records, and then having provided that level of structure, we can choose to move designated documents from one location to another. So that's a description of what we're going to look at, and now there's going to be a live demonstration where we're actually going to show you how you can use the concept searching suite of products to perform just this type of task. So let's switch over to our browser. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this workflow taxonomy, which is based upon a workflow term store entry, term set entry in SharePoint. And for the demonstration, I'm going to focus on PII information, or documents that contain personally identifiable information. Good examples of that would be, for example, documents that contain credit card numbers. So here we can see that we've got a couple of regular expressions set up to detect Visa card numbers in documents. And as an example of some other kind of PII, here's a simple example where we're looking for a mother's maiden name to appear in a document. And when we find that, that might indicate a level of sensitive personal information. And we're also looking for social security card numbers, and here's a regular expression designed to find those. So a variety of information sources contributing to a document receiving a PII tag. But when it does, we're going to pass that through a workflow and migrate those documents to a designated location in SharePoint. And from here, you can see that I've got a variety of sources configured in my demonstration. But the one I'm going to use is this workflow location, which is a local C drive folder. And if I just click on here, you'll see that I've got a number of documents nested inside. And there's a subfolder structure. So here you can see I've got a folder 1. Inside that, there's a folder 2. And inside there, I've got a number of documents nested. So this is what I'm going to use for the demonstration. And before I run the demonstration, I just want you to see the workflow that I've got set up here. And the workflow is a simple one. What it's going to do is it's going to use the taxonomy condition which says if a document receives the PII term, metadata term, from the workflow taxonomy, then this particular workflow is going to run. And what the workflow is going to do is it's going to migrate the document from its existing location on the file share and move it into SharePoint. And here's the SharePoint server we're going to move it into. Here's the library where we're going to move it. And we've got some other settings that control the movement of the documents. And the two post-migration actions that we've got configured are actually going to find the Social Security card number and Visa card number, if present in the document, and push them to a text property in SharePoint as part of the workflow. So that's what we're going to do. And just to complete the demonstration, let's go ahead, select the source that I want to process, reclassify all of the documents inside that location, and then if I go to SharePoint, you can see that at the beginning of the demonstration, the PII library is completely empty. There are no documents here yet. But as a result of reprocessing the small number of documents in that file share location, any of those documents that received the PII metadata tag are going to be workflowed to this location. And it doesn't take very long to process a few dozen documents, so all I need to do now is refresh my browser. And we should see that we've got a few documents have been identified. And we can see we've got a couple of documents in the root folder. And as I said, the actual Social Security card number or Visa card number that was found in those documents has been extracted. And it's been pushed into SharePoint properties, a text property. But the couple of columns here, we've got a UK public sector column and a workflow column, and these are managed metadata properties in SharePoint, and these have not been populated yet. Concept searching will populate these managed metadata properties, but we don't do so during the insert operation or during a bulk upload into SharePoint. What we do is we rely on an event receiver notifying the concept searching server that these documents have arrived in SharePoint. And so within a few seconds, concept searching will begin processing these documents and classifying them, and will populate these two properties automatically within a few seconds of the documents being uploaded. And just so that we know that there is an outstanding operation, you can see on the far right-hand side there's a pending icon next to the classification status, so that we can see visually there is an outstanding action waiting to happen on these documents. The folder structure has been retained. You can see that one of the workflow settings is to optionally preserve the folder structure from the file system. So you'll remember that on my C drive I had a folder 1 location, and then inside a folder 2 location, and then some documents nested inside there. And we can see that if we want to, we can preserve that folder structure. And if I go back to the root folder, you can see that the process is completed, and the US public sector and the workflow managed metadata properties have been populated automatically for these new documents that have been migrated into SharePoint. So that's a simple example of the process, but I think we've captured all of the key elements. It's the ability to create a specific workflow taxonomy, the ability to identify the types of documents that we wish to migrate, and then using the workflow manager we can set up specific rules for specific types of documents and migrate them to different locations depending on what type of document we're dealing with. And then there's a range of ancillary functionality that we can include, such as the population of text fields, as I've demonstrated here, or the changing of a content type, for example, which I haven't demonstrated today, but which we did do on a previous how-to webinar. So that wraps things up for our short-term presentation today. Thank you very much, and goodbye.